And now we'll roll into part two of the webinar titled Introduction to Strawberry Production, presented by Anthony. Take it away, Anthony.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move right into preparing the land for transplanting. This is for new plants, of course. Um, you want your field as weed-free as possible, and this is in particular with perennial weeds, because perennial weeds are more difficult to keep in check, especially since most of the herbicides that are available for use in strawberries are pre-emergent types, which are not effective uh, on a lot of perennial weeds like Canna thistle or quackgrass. So you definitely want to get those in check because it'll cause you huge headaches down the road. So to get those in check. As I mentioned before, a green manure plow down the year before is ideal. However, if there's a pasture before, you probably don't need to do that, and you see that on your soil test that your organic matter is more than sufficient. Um, you want to rotivate in the spring. You want to loosen that soil bed up and to control weeds. You want no large clumps. I almost say it's like a brown sugar consistency for good transplant root to soil contact. If there's big lumps, it's harder for the plants to start growing again and growing roots and get incorporated into the soil. And also the big clumps leave air pockets which potentially could dry out the transplants, and it's just not as beneficial compared to a nice tilled soil bed. So what you're looking at on the picture there, that's what you would get in your box of 1,000 plants is bare root plants. So these are harvested the year before Nova Scotia, and roots are trimmed and they're boxed up and put in cold storage. So usually about, -1, 0 degrees for the winter, and then they're shipped out here in the spring. Um, so first thing you do is what recommend for growers is after you transplant, you apply Chateau, which is a post-emergent herbicide over the whole field within like 24 hours of transplanting. And this gives you excellent 6 to 8 weeks of weed control. This is to say you have to do that, but it does make life a lot easier for you, especially as you get more and more acres. The other option is a lot more, is just doing more hand weeding and cultivation between rows. Um, so you want to water the plants right after transplanting, and the crown is half buried. I'm going to have a diagram showing ideal placement of the strawberry plant in the ground. And you want to maintain uniform soil moisture levels for the season, but not overly saturated. Just need good soil. Those plants are coming out of dormancy. They're going to go through some transplant shock, and they need adequate nutrients and moisture to get going. So this diagram, as you can see, the one on the far side is the correct placement. So you want it half up the crown. If it's too shallow, you're going to see roots, and that's definitely not ideal. And too deep could potentially slow down the development of the plant um, and development of the leaves coming out of if it's completely buried, it could negatively impact the plant getting developed, set it back. So you pick up your plants from um, storage that PFJ has them stored at peak of the market in their coolers, and you could put it in your own cooler, or if you're going to plant them right away, you want to move plants from the cooler the day before planting to warm up, like in an unheated shed or something, so they're closer to uh, what the temperatures are outside. Ideally, to plant on a cool, cloudy day, just to kind of not dry out the plants anymore. I always recommend soaking the berry transplants in a pail of water for like half an hour before planting, just to kind of help hydrate those roots again. And transplant machines, typically they're set at a distance of 8 to 12 inches apart, and it's a single row planting. And your width between rows is kind of based on your rotovating equipment width. So, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And kind of a nice way to, after your transplant, especially with a transplanter, to go back, walk the field, and look to see if any plants have not been planted deep enough. And a nice trick that a grower told me about is he just used the end of a hockey stick to kind of push the plant in a little bit more so the roots aren't showing, and so you're halfway up the crown. The plants can take a little bit of abuse. They're not uh, they're firm, and they can be kind of pushed into the ground without fear of you're killing them or anything. So the number of plants per acre, again, I mentioned is about, a lot of it's based on your your equipment for rotivating. So typically it's 8 to 12 inches, and a lot of growers it's like 5 to 6 feet, 4 to 5, 6 feet between rows. So there's your transplanter. So you have your plants up top, and then you feed it into it's a it's a kind of a finger system that holds the plant in a circle, drops it at the bottom, and you can see at the in the next photo there, there's a furrow being made in front of the transplanter, and the plants drop into that furrow, and then soil is brought back in and packed around the plant. So, meant talking before about key times for strawberry irrigation rainfall, um, definitely at establishment and when runners are being developed over the first season. Um, initiation of berry sets, so that's kind of spring year two, and then kind of at green fruit stage, but not right before picking. If you over irrigate as the berries are almost ripe, you can cause the berries to become softer and actually turn a bit mushy. Some growers actually, if you have had issues with, let's say we have like a 2 or 3 inch rain right at harvest or before harvest, um, the berries swell up so much that they just become mushy and not harvestable. Um, before You definitely want to water before signs of wilting occur. Otherwise, you're going to reduce your yield. Um, and another key time for irrigating is after renovations um, of the June bearing strawberries. So that is like late July, early August, because that is also, you want to help assist with regrowth of leaves, but also fruit bud formation in August and September, which I mentioned before. That's the fruit buds are formed the year before, that they come out the year after and form berries. And then, of course, in the fall, unless there has been some good moisture in the fall, you want to kind of make sure the plants have good moisture going into winter. Um, the plants that are stressed due to lack of moisture going into winter have a higher risk of winter injury. So in that establishment year, as I mentioned, you're still, even though you're doing a pre-emergent herbicide, you're still doing some hand weeding into row tillage after the herbicide residues disappear, which is after usually 4 to 6 weeks, depending on weather conditions. Which is good because by that time you're going to start seeing runner production, and so you don't want that herbicide kill layer at the surface. because you want the runners to be able to root down through it and start growing. So you're going to manage the runners through your tillage to kind of pull runners back into the row, and you want to kind of maintain a row width of about 2 feet. And again, as I mentioned before, you want to deblossom the flowers. So um, this is so that plant focuses its energy on crown development and runners. And any runners, daughter plants rooted and established before kind of typically the end of August, you have a greater percentage that will overwinter successfully. Later runners, into September, they may not have been established long enough to have the reserves to survive the winter. So that first year going into winter, you could put down a late fall post-emergent herbicide, typically when plants are dormant. So we're looking at, late October into November. Um, at that time, you could do a fall granule application, and you want to, again, I mentioned before about irrigation, you want good soil moisture, and typically you would apply a straw, cereal straw, mid to late November, early December, when plants are dormant, but before air temperatures get, colder than -10, and especially in consecutive nights. So you're looking at, for the amount of straw you need per acre, uh, your target is like 2 to 3 tons per acre, which, depending on how tight the round bales are, could be 10 to 14 round bales per acre. And you want to settle this into kind of, when you first spread it, it's like about 4 to 6 inches thick, and that'll settle down to 2 to 3 inches thick. Putting more um, straw than is needed doesn't benefit the plants. If anything, it could um, delay um, plants coming out, emerging in the spring, and cause lack of oxygen down to air movement uh, with the plants, um, like smothering them. So you don't, more is not better for straw. They're just the right amount. Okay, so moving on to the harvest year. So in the spring, you're going to remove the mulch kind of early mid-May, when the risk of kind of a kill frost, like below -6, is passed. Um, Growers of, hand rake it off, or a specialty rake that you go around behind a tractor that you see, for haying, or even rotary mowers to kind of clear off the straw off the row. And you just leave it, unless it's too much straw, you leave most of it between rows. If there is excess, then you just drag it out to the ends and leave it there. And you can do a granular fertilizer application, especially if you didn't want to do one in the fall the previous year. But let's say, even though it's been a hard winter, a lot of cold temperatures, or maybe we haven't had much snow cover, to assist the straw with overwintering, um, you could apply a minor low nitrogen application just to give it a boost to help with plant vigor. So going into the harvest year, just looking at uh, pest management, looking at weed control. So if you haven't applied a herbicide in late fall, you apply one in the spring. Um, and then again, from the straw, even if it's a clean straw, you're going to have volunteer seedlings from wheat, or whatever cereal you used from the straw. So you could use a grassy herbicide, um, post-emergent herbicide for grassy volunteer weeds to keep that in check. And you can also use there, like I mentioned before, most of the herbicides are pre-emergent, but there is a post-emergent herbicide, Lantrell, that you can apply at renovation, to, let's say you have an issue with Canada thistle or some other um, broadleaf perennial weed. insect control that harvest year. Um, I'm going to mention this a couple times, but you want to spray insecticides in the early morning or evening when your bees or pollinators are not active. Your pollinators help increase your yield, so you want to protect your pollinators. The number one insect pest in all strawberry fields in Manitoba is tarnished plant bug, or is the Lygus species. This is caught as the seedy end you see on berries, as you can see in that photo. And this is present every year. They're just here. Um, so, but but by doing a control spray at bloom, let's say early and late bloom, one or two sprays, it'll make a huge difference to protect the flower and then ultimately your berry. Because the tarnish plant bug feeds on the developing flower, causes it, damages it, so then it causes that CD end. Just to just to point out, you can also get CD end if during flowering you had poor pollination conditions. So let's say uh, light frost, or let's say it was rainy during bloom, and so just you weren't getting many pollinators on the flowers or incomplete pollination of the flowers. You can also see that with poor weather conditions at bloom. See, you can see CDN. Spotted living Drosophila. Of course, that's a big issue in raspberries, particularly. It's less of an issue in strawberries normally. It's typically an issue because strawberries starting harvest late June, early July. Usually in a normal year, SWD, spotted wing, uh, comes in, the population levels are higher, kind of like more mid-July. So it's more your later harvest that you may do a control spray or protection spray. So that kind of lasts, you know, 30 to 40 or 20 to 30, 40% of your harvest. But the big insect pest is tarnished plant bug. And for disease control, we've been quite fortunate with some dry years and that we haven't had a lot of disease pressure. That changed last year with wetter field conditions. So we were seeing fruit rot, particularly gray mold, which is botrytis. And this was an issue in wet fields this past season. Um, or if you, so for growers, some growers did start to see fruit rot last year. Um, so because it was there the previous year, recommend to spray a protection spray fungicide for this coming year because it was in the field last year. You want to have good airflow within the canopy. So that's what I mean. If you over fertilize, you make the canopy too dense, you reduce the airflow, that increases the susceptibility, the conditions for fruit rot, gray mold. Um, so typically the fungicides you apply at bloom, even though you see it at when the berries are at harvest time, you control it at bloom. And then if it conditions are still favorable for fruit rot, let's say wet conditions, then you would do a spray at green fruit stage. Disease control, again, this was an issue this past year starting, so may have to start spraying a little bit more for this coming year. I haven't had to the last couple of years, but again, good airflow across the canopy, avoid excess nitrogen, and um, typically sometimes your control spray for fruit rot will also help control leaf diseases. So again, mentioned about strawberries are self-pollinated. However, pollinators do help increase your yields. And typically it'll be like one bee colony per acre. Um, they again, I'll repeat this again, spray insecticides when pollinators are not active at dawn and dusk. And conserve native bee habitats where like a lot of your solitary bees are coming out of, which is your shelter belts. And we have a Manitoba egg fact sheet on strawberry pollinators and visitors. Just Google that. strawberry pollinators, Manitoba Ag, come up with a good description of a lot of the different type of pollinators that would visit your plant, visit the strawberry flowers. So in the harvest year, for you pick customer consideration, safety first is priority one. You want to set up a good operation for flow and people and vehicle traffic flow, and keep in consideration what your cash and debit options are. So you can see here kind of a typical operation where you want the flow so that people aren't crowded in the same area, ones that are coming and the ones that are leaving, and they have the parking area in a safe area so that you know you want to keep customer safety and your worker safety top of mind. So these some keys to a successful pick farm. Answering phone machine or websites, Facebook page. It gives you price, conditions, and hours for the farm. You're going to be open on, when harvest time, it's harvest time. You got to go. So it's weekends, summer holidays, um, and make accommodations for children because a lot of people, this is a family activity. This is something to get out, pick their own food, be out in the country. So make it an experience for them. Ample parking on the good season roads. Uh, Supply containers, even though some customers might bring their own 4 liter pails, and then just have good signs that tell the rules, the prices, even how to pick a strawberry, that type of thing. You want courteous, knowledgeable employees, um, clean everything, clean facility. Um, Maybe provide free drinking water or sell cold drinks and ice cream, access to shade, um, let's say near where people are going to pay, access to clean restrooms or porta potties. Maybe the option is you also sell vegetables, so you have customers come, across the whole season. If you're going to do pre-pick sales, you wanted to kind of determine how many you're going to set aside for pre-pick sales and how many for you pick sales. So you can have a reservation system picked it set up, which you can do. PFGA.com has a program there. Um, you'll have to hire picking staff. You'll need a cooler to keep your berries at ideal storage temperatures. Um, have rules for pre-pick sales. When you pick them up, a number of pails. Some farms have a maximum of, you pick up, you can only buy 2 baskets per customer type of thing. You hire pickers, they're paid by the pails picked, but they cannot make less than minimum wage. However, a good picker should make 2 to 3 times minimum wage per hour easily. If not, reassign them to different duties like parking flow or payment booth or stop employing. Um, this is a great first job for, local high school students. However, if the parent is phoning, that may be an indication that the student may not be as eager for the job as you hope. So if the student is inquiring, that's a good sign. 4 liter covered baskets. You want to list your farm name and address, maybe put a code on it for traceability so you can see which field it came out of and the date. Typically, if the depending on your customers, if your customers in that region are bringing a lot of 4 liter pails, then you're probably only using 500 baskets per acre. But if they're not, then you're looking at more that over 1,000 baskets per acre type of thing. And the prairie fruit branding, you could purchase baskets from Midwest Packaging, has the prairie fruit branding and color scheme on it, and it also puts your farm name and address on there as well. So this is kind of just a points of how to sell your farm because you're selling your image. So people want to see an attractive facility, neat and clean, staff that also neat and clean. The location appearance are the most important aspects of your farm, not necessarily price. They want it if it looks like a clean facility, then the berries are clean. They just have a good image of your operation. And as I mentioned before, okay, so there's the Prairie Fruit Branding Initiative. And so these logos and taglines are all available to PFGA members through, and it's downloadable through the PFGA Farmers Only website portal. Um, and this is a great way of just trying to, this is was an initiative between Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba to kind of brand Prairie Fruit um, and to kind of have a similar logo with old growers. So after harvest, as one of the previous uh, fruit crop specialists said used to say to growers, you have a time for a cup of coffee after harvest, and then get right back at it. So you want to mow off the leaves of the completed harvested strawberries, and that's to open up the canopy for new leaf growth and fruit bud development. But you don't want to scalp the plants. You just want to take off those older leaves. And you can apply at that time a granular fertilizer based on your previous soil test and rotivate between rows to narrow the rows so that they're 2 feet wide. And then you can also put down a pre-emergent herbicide at this time. And then again, continue with irrigation to help with regrowth and fruit bud development. And then again, similar to your first year establishment year, pre-winter care, you want to put a herbicide down, fall fertilizer application, keep the good soil moisture good, and then apply, late November, early December. So just a brief thing, just I'm not going to go a lot of detail on this, but on-farm food safety. So essentially what you want to establish a system that will reduce the potential for chemical, microbial, and physical contamination of berries, and the ability to trace the product back to limit the scope of contamination. So that's why it's good to put a date on your baskets and which field it came out of, whatever field code you use. There are manuals on the CanadaGap.ca website. I have printed binders as well, so contact me if you want a copy. Essentially, what an on-farm safety program is record keeping. When you fertilize, when a chemical application is put on, when you irrigate. So not only does it help you with your production management, but also helps you with your on-farm food safety. You want to put worker hygiene uh, protocols in place, have clean containers stored in a clean area, field and facility clean, um, and with irrigation water, since the growers are using drip line, you know, causing issues on fruit is greatly reduced because it's just dripping on the ground as opposed to being sprayed on the fruit or anything or on the plant. Some of the resources, um, there's a commercial strawberry guide to the prairies. It was printed in 2005, but we're updating it this year. I know the Prairie Fruit Growers Association still has some copies of that available for sale. For pesticide search, we use the Crop Protection Hub of Ontario Agriculture. And it it'll go through, you could pick your crop, what your disease issue is or insect issue is or whatever, but you just need to look at the label to confirm that that product is labor registered for use in Manitoba. And what I mean by that, if there's nothing saying on that label, like saying restrictions on regions, like just for Eastern Canada or just for BC, then it's usually a national label, and that means it's registered for use in Manitoba. And of course, we have Manitoba Agriculture, our strawberry production website. So that's just type in Google Manitoba MB Ag strawberry, and it'll come up. We do a seasonal report that during the growing season uh, into fall, and it's Manitoba. Just again, to Google Manitoba Agriculture's fruit crop report. They'll come up, and you can subscribe to that. And typically, we do a couple reports a month on timely topics on production and pest issues and that type of thing. And again, there's my contact info for if you need to contact me or think about getting the strawberry production. Happy to help you out and get you going on this. And hopefully, we definitely need more strawberry growers across the province, as I said, because demand is greater than supply. And um, you're the nice thing about growing strawberries is everyone loves eating strawberries. So and they're great for you, they're healthy for you. So um, it's a very good crop to get into and enjoy. That's it for my slides. So thank you for your attention and yeah, open it up to questions.
Well, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, if anyone has any additional questions, type them in the chat feature, the question and answer. There are a couple of questions that have come in, Anthony, so I'm just going
Okay,
to read them off to you.
okay.
Crystal asks, will there be a discussion on the indoor growing of strawberries?
Not at this for this webinar. We're doing in later in March uh, webinar on high tunnels, and at that point, I will briefly talk about uh, growing different, essentially raspberry and strawberry crops in high tunnels. So that'll be a introduction to high tunnels. I can't remember the date we had for that. It was
It's
um,
March 18th is
yes,
the webinar that will include some information on producing both fruit crops and vegetable crops in high tunnels.
yeah.
And registration's available online for that now. Okay, then second question that came in, is a 5-year rotation necessary?
If you want to maintain good yields and have less disease issues, yes. Especially if you're on a heavier soil, let's say a clay loam soil, where fruit rot can be an issue. Um, you need those rotations out to reduce the amount of um, disease that is present in those fields that could affect strawberries. So over time, because there's no host for that particular pathogen, um, it will decrease over time. So yeah, um, maintaining that ideally 5-year rotation.
Okay, thank you. Uh, Another question, Raymond asks, is it recommended to dig out daughter plants to get an extra row of plants, or are you setting yourself up for disease problems?
No, because that's no different than if you were dragging, pulling the runners back into the row and rooting them down. So it's just a little more work. You would have to be um, what I've done in the past when I was short on plants is I would take the runners and just soak them in water for a little bit, let's say a couple days. And because the runner wants to root, there's rooting nodes on the bottom of the runner where the daughter plant. And so to get them going would help when you transplant them. I mean, you can put them directly into the next row, but then you'd have to be very um, vigilant on keeping them moist so that they would root down because you're cutting them off from the mother plant where they're getting water and nutrients, they're more susceptible to drying out and dying. So then you would have to really be vigilant on making sure you're keeping them moist so they root right away as fast as possible.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer has a question regarding irrigation. With drip irrigation, we have the option of fertigation. Is granular fertilization still recommended over fertigation, and why?
Yeah, I'd say Granular fertilizer is still recommended because you can get you the higher amounts that you need for strawberry fields could be supplied by the granular. Also, it's not when you for foliar or for not foliar, sorry, for fertigation, um, that's all at once now. So it'll be used by the plants immediately, as opposed to granular, as it breaks down, it's slowly being used by the plants. So it's more spread over the season. You think about fertigation more to address um, nutrient issues that are present right at that time. And a lot of times you would use tissue testing of leaves to see if you have any kind of nutrient shortage that you need to address quickly. So still the primary way to get your NPK on the field is through granular fertilizer.
Hey, thank you. We've had a couple of more questions come in. Um, Crystal's asking about the details of the March 18th webinar. She was the one who was asking about indoor cultivation, and I'll take care of sending her that information.
Good.
Um, Another question is plastic culture and raised bed also an option for Manitoba?
It is, but it's a little more difficult um, to use June bearing because June bearing plants runner a lot, which is great for matted row production, not so great for uh, plastic mulch, raised beds type of system. That is typically used for day neutrals. So growers that have grown day neutrals in the past do grow them on a slight, lightly raised bed, depending on the soil type. If it's a heavier soil, definitely a raised bed, but plant into a plastic mulch in a double staggered row. And that's because day neutrals typically don't runner as much as a June bearing. And the variety you want to use if you're doing a field planting of day neutrals would be typically Seascape is the hardiest. Um, some growers have had success with Albion as well, but Seascape's kind of the go-to. And you would treat it almost like a 2-year crop. So for sure, get a harvest that first year. That second year is more hit and miss. And also, you can cover with straw, but that can be sometimes an issue trying to put straw onto plastic mulch with it blowing off. So, but I mean, it is an option.
Okay, thank you. Monica has a question. Do you let all daughter plants live, or do you thin rows at some point?
No, you would just, so let's say the runners start to come in kind of late July into or mid-July even. You would just keep pulling all the runners into the row, or, you know, as they start spreading into the roads and you're just because you're doing some cultivation, you're just rotivating them. So you're just doing it enough to build up that row width to about two 2 feet wide. But I don't you don't really have to worry about thinning them out. A lot of them, especially the ones that, are coming in late August into September, are not going to overwinter. So yeah, it's not an issue.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any further questions, please type them in the chat. I'm not seeing any additional questions showing up at this point. I'm just going to double check that I haven't skipped over someone's question inadvertently, and no, I'm not seeing any. Well, I'd like to thank Anthony for his presentation, and that will conclude today's webinar. On behalf of the Horticulture School Organizing Committee, I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar. Next week's webinar will be entitled High Tunnel Design and Construction. If you'd like information on how to register for that webinar, or as some of you have put in the chat, you're looking for information on how to register for the third webinar, which would be high tunnel production, both fruit and vegetable. Either way, if you send me an email, and my email address is tom.gonsal, as in Victor, es, at gov.mb.ca, I can send you the registration link to upcoming webinars. Okay, I'm just going to double check the chat here before we close this out. And Terry has thank you. And Crystal is asking me for my email. Other than that, I think that we're complete. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I look forward to seeing you at the upcoming webinars. Thanks very much. Have a good day.